Hey there.
Hey. It said it was an after party, but I didn't.
I was so. What happened was, if any of you are happening to watch this live on YouTube and X, every Friday we have a morning coffee stream, but the panel and a crew cannot make it because they have very important commitments, as do all of we. So I just thought, okay, we'll just reschedule. And after that, you and I always have these great discussions on Telegram. So it was really kind of like the after party conversations. And I said, hold on a minute, why are we just keeping this to ourselves? I always said I wanted to we should have a bigger audience too. But you are always very selective about, well, if we put this out to the public, would it be something like casting pearls to swine? Those are not your words, but I know what you're coming from. It's like sometimes the stuff that we talk about may be too abstract.
And it's more like bringing the swine, like we're the swine, and the pearls would be forced to endure the swine.
So for those of you who are not familiar with the reference, it's from the New Testament, where Jesus had advised his apostles not to cast pearls to swine if they were going to a town and they were bringing the good news and people don't get it. Just shake the dust off your feet and go on. And I always got a feeling that a lot of the topics that you and I talked about,
the parable of the sower, the parable of the sower.
The parable of the sower, yes. So, and
it's the gospel last Sunday, by the way.
Yeah. So it's and again, for many of you,
I'm sure you knew because you went to church.
I don't go to church anymore. Many people look at me disapprovingly, but I think for people who've just discovered NDR on X or have been following NDR for quite a while in person community, you may have noticed this quirk about NDR, how I build this group as being classical, liberal, independent thinkers, but yet there is this component in the background where we talk a lot about, we reference a lot about Bible scriptures and coincidentally Archon, or maybe not coincidentally, fate has it that Archon of Graceland also is well-versed and pretty knowledgeable in your branch of Christianity, just to put it that way. Exactly. I've always said that I have some ex-evangelical background, but you are a practicing Catholic, right? But even that's probably too broad of a term.
I don't know if I'm practicing. I'm not sure how Catholic I am, but
okay.
I grew up in this Anglo-Catholic world, which is just high church Anglican, Cardinal Newman type. Oxford movement world. So it's a kind of it's sort of in some ways more Catholic than Catholic, and in other ways totally heretical. So I don't know. It's a bit of a strange corner of the world to occupy.
But what I found when you and I first met and we started discussing politics, the state of the world, the state of American politics, we have found ourselves often referencing what we understand in the scripture. Even though I'm myself not practicing anymore, I found that's just very helpful for me to understand the human condition, why people behave the way they do, say in what I call the political hamster wheel, right? This tension between so-called liberal and conservative, left or right. And you and I have been able to look beyond those labels and terms and see what's really ultimately driving this cycle of retardation and revolution. It just is just repeated again and again. It doesn't matter which party is in power. There's just like some themes that it seems to us anyway, that the Bible, how we read the Bible, seems to have a more high resolution explanation of why things are the way they are. Could they be better or not? And you are one of the few people that I've met through India that that could discuss this. And sometimes there's a lot of hesitation between the two of us in our Telegram exchange. Like, can we even like share this with a wider audience? Would they even get what we're saying? And then you would often find me kind of hamster wheeling myself, that is, being in this state of agitation that really yields no productive action, when I see people like Jordan Peterson, Dennis Prager, and all these people on the so-called conservative side creating their own pulpit and referencing the Bible too, that in a way that you and I maybe feel like, wait a minute, you're not really getting that story too. So
Right.
so I don't know whether I'm kind of all over the place with that intro, but
Well, I think it comes back to, it's fun to talk about, it turns into Bible study, right? Because you can pick any Bible verse, and then you can find something to either apply it to, like parable, take the parable of the sower, right? Jesus says, don't throw your seeds on rocks because they won't grow. Don't throw your seeds on dry ground because they'll just shrivel up and die. Plant your seeds in, in sort of good earth, and then they'll grow to be big, strong plants or big, strong crops.
Yeah.
It's kind of it's a sort of an uncomplicated idea, right?
Yeah.
But it's also has lots of sort of subtleties into it about, well, who's the rock, right? Who's the dry earth and who's the good earth, right? And it becomes very easy to start going around and calling everybody you don't like a rock, and everybody that gets on your nerves the dry earth, and
or not.
And then only the good earth, of course, is just you and me, and everybody else are rocks. So that's kind of an easy place to end up. And of course, I don't entirely think that's what Jesus meant. Kind of declare everybody else a rock, and just you and the people you like to be the good earth.
Yeah.
So that's where it's going to be interesting. Is like, okay, well, if you have to go and plant your seeds out there, what constitutes the good earth, right?
Well, actually, before we even go talk about planting seeds, I think the thing that you and I are, I don't know, we're struggling to figure out is like, what is the POV that we want to advance here? What is the point of view here? What is the good news here, so to speak, that you and I, and then even there, that because of our different backgrounds and branches of Christianity, we also run into some different perspective of who is the authority here. What is the road sign here that we should be going with, right? And in your case, it's the very long established tradition and history of we just use the word Catholic because I understand it's not, I guess it's people, when they say Catholic, people aren't even clear what.
I think, honestly, I think if you had to connect, it's instant. You have this, low church Anglican evangelical background, which is a very uninstitutional church, right? It's like,
yes,
3 guys get together, pull up some chairs, put out a plate of cookies, and then you do church, right? Whereas
that's in the Bible too, by the way. Jesus was where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name.
Exactly, right. Whereas
very decentralized, okay,
very institutional, very high church world where like people are arguing about whether the lace on the cassocks should be, or the surplice should be 3.5 inches or 4 inches, right? I mean, you get down to kind of very, and should it be Venetian or should it be Genoan, right? I mean, you get people will fight to the death over arcane little details.
Yeah, but for the people watching this, we're not going to assume they care enough about history to know Genoan or Venetian like you into.
No, but my point is, you're going to have like incredibly like stupid fights over like tiny little details that don't matter, because that's just part of the fun of the being a high church institutional religion guy, right? I mean, you guys are going to fight over over the meaning of words in Bible verses.
Yeah, I used to, not anymore.
And you don't care that you have plastic chairs and paper plates.
Exactly. And what you have got me to start thinking about things differently. Is that I also care a lot about history, right? I care a lot about continuity and tradition, going way back. People often hear me say the word Greco-Roman, and they look at me like I'm just like a weird spurging guy. Like, well, this is 2025. Who still uses that word? And it has occurred to me that if we were to line up, Protestant, again, very broad because I understand the many denomination and Catholic, okay, Catholic, never mind all the different strike, that the Catholics actually have been more a better vessel and connected to that aspect of history that I care about, right? Like most Protestants, like if I talk about Greco-Roman or even America's founding fathers, the way they would reference just casually, calling themselves Publius when they wrote the Federalist paper. Like today, most evangelical people that in the Midwest, like, what's that? I don't care. They probably don't even care why for example, the Supreme Court building. Why does it look like a replica out of ancient Greece? They probably have no care and affinity about that. But I found that people in mostly Catholic traditions, they have some consciousness and awareness, like, there's some time they're connected to that. So it has made me kind of rethink some about Protestant.
I'm going to sort of just take the other side here. Those, often the magic and the interesting thing, particularly about American sort of low church Protestantism, is its willingness to sort of break out of the weight of the past, right? And just sort of throw it all away and just come up with something entirely new, a whole new idea and a whole new way of looking at the world. And there's something exciting about that, right? Because you can kind of like, Heidegger talks about this, right? Is the only way to actually create a new philosophy is just to kind of go back to the beginning and start again. And American evangelicalism, sorry, theory, I can speak English, kind of does that in a lot of ways, right? I think, it gets derailed by things like Christian Zionism. It gets derailed by the kind of what's that thing? The prosperity gospel movement. It gets derailed by the megachurch movement. There's all these kind of institutional sort of like things that kind of creep into the American evangelical movement that kind of that knock it off of its fundamental original purpose, which is to kind of see the gospel in an entirely new way, without the burden of history, without the burden of philosophy and tradition and the past, and just to kind of try to experience that moment of innovation that maybe Jesus saw.
Yeah,
that's the cool thing about it, right? That's, if you go to read the founders, read Orestes Brownson, you go to read the Federalist Papers, like that was the moment of inspiration that kind of led to the founding of America. And I think that's what people are ultimately searching to get back to, is that new creative energy that lets people kind of see things in a new way, as opposed to which can also lead to sort of horrible ideas, but you can also, which is why, by the way, I think it's important to have, you either want to have the explosion of novelty, or you want to have the weight of tradition. The worst thing is to sort of like create this mush of the two of them, because that just gives you, gobbledygook, right? That's how you get to megachurch prosperity gospel Christian nationalism, which just doesn't make any sense of, it's just goofy.
So I'm not going to go into Christian nationalism. Probably say that because
Christian Zionism, Christian nationalism, whatever.
Because the last show we were attempting to understand the term woke right.
Right.
But
Same
I don't
thing.
want to. Yeah, I don't think we're ready
It's just
to.
institutionalizing innovation, right? And as soon as you institutionalize innovation, well, you don't have innovation anymore. You just have a dumber version of whatever institution you're trying to replace.
So what is the innovation here then? That you think that the Protestants are what's the innovation there with
in the American founding?
In the American founding, yes.
It's it's an attempt to create a Protestant magisterium, right? A sort of a popular magisterium, right? So the Catholic Church has this thing called the magisterium, which is really just the collection of all of the kind of ideas and conclusions it's reached over the past 2,000 years, right? It includes the Bible. It includes a lot of thinking on families, on the economy, on everything, right? I mean, you can just go to this giant collection of work, but all of that got created by an elite group that sort of, mostly centered around Rome or centered in these councils. But it was an elite movement, right? The American founding and the American magisterium was a popular movement, right? And so if you want to think of the ideas that make up America, well, they can come from anywhere. And that can lead to a lot of weirdness, but it's also led to a lot of very interesting, novel views on what it means to be a people.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Okay. I mean, you and I are both American, and neither of us were born here, but I think we both feel very American, right? In a way that we probably would not feel, I don't know, Nigerian, right? Like if you and I both moved to Nigeria, I just don't think we're going to be Nigerian, right? Neither of us are black. We're not going to.
When I have conversations with you, I don't feel American. I feel like we're discussing, critiquing America from more of an international background, but in a very supportive way. I know it's probably hard for people to understand that. It's
that's the point, right? That's the whole being American is to sort of be able to kind of question and create. It's the innovation part, right? Whereas if you want to be Nigerian, well, I think, there's probably some very rigid ideas of what it means to be Nigerian that you're just not going to get away from.
Right. So talking to you would be like talking to Tocqueville or Bastiat or maybe Montesquieu, people who are not from America. Not born in America, but then they kind of have the, if I can say, the benefit of being on the outside looking in and can critique like what they like, what could be better, and we're here to help this experiment.
Yeah. Or more just what's going on? Like, what is this thing? Like, what's it doing?
Yeah, and
I think it's maybe sort of hubristic to sort of suggest that we could make it better, because that implies sort of this. I don't know. This just implies this whole idea of progressivism, and I'm not sure that's the right frame. It's more understanding what this thing is and what it's doing, and then once you sort of see what it's doing, then you can go, okay, that it's like. We have a blender, not a microwave, right? And so quit trying to, put your TV dinners in the blender, because it's just not, you're not getting a meal. You're just making a mess.
Yeah. So for me, I've always felt, so maybe not making it better is not the way of putting it, but I've felt that the thinking that went into the founding of this country is pretty good.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just people who really thought this out well. But we also have the benefit of 200 years after what they thought about, and I think you and I have also seen some variables that they have not accounted for, um, in terms of the type of people and the kind of thinking that has replaced those what we think are original ideals.
But there's been some good innovations around. I mean, you take, there's sort of 5 eras in America, right? You've got the founding, the Constitution, the Civil War, the New Deal, and then the Civil Rights Movement, right? If you want to take the big sort of epochs in America, right? And each of those moments gave us some truly innovative thinking, right? I think what we're in the middle of right now is a sort of sixth, call it, you use the French word, right? It's the Sixth Republic, right? Is where France actually does a hard reboot every time they go through one of these experiences, but we tend to have more of a soft fork. We don't erase the Constitution and create a brand new one. We sort of just shift things a lot. But we're going through some version of circling what is going to be the Sixth Republic of America. And the interesting thing is, like, well, who's going to articulate that, and how is it going to be articulated? And it's going to be through Congress, right? It's going to be and it's going to be bipartisan, because it has to be, right? Those the great sort of declarations of kind of who we are have to be bipartisan. So it's that fusion of, like, what comes out of the fight between MAGA and woke that's going to create this next.
So for there to be a next iteration, which is an extension of the original one or an evolution of that, one of the things that needs to be in place is the language for people to understand and describe what it is that they want. And one of the things that I talk often a lot about was that American political language doesn't have that range yet, or is a script enough to describe what people.
I think we're more of an action country than a talking country too. I mean, I think we're seeing it's more like, if you look at the civil rights movement, right? It didn't have a lot of very complicated language. It was much more a result of a lot of activity and a lot of action, a lot of people, being places and doing things, and there's a variety of protests, a little bit of political violence, a little bit of kind of people just talking amongst themselves, private, quiet acts of kind of integration, right? I mean, you just see people, consciously having Black people for dinner, right? It's, we're gonna be friendly, right? And that might not have gone as well as it could have, because everybody felt weird and awkward, but it was that kind of activity that created that ultimate movement, right? I don't think there are like founding documents of the civil rights era or founding documents of the New Deal.
Well, I would think that it was able to move along because whoever was driving that movement had to describe things differently and come up with a different narrative that they could sell to the popular and cultural institutions.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that you and I often try to examine is, like, are these even correct way of describing what is really the underlying tensions and problem? I mean, is there actually even a problem, that these narratives are trying to describe and trying to institutionalize? So, and in my opinion, I think that some of the thinking behind this is kind of dubious.
Sure.
And
Well, but that's just the nature of all political movements. Is it's a sea of just chaos.
yeah,
That's that. I forget who was the letter. There's the angel in the whirlwind that directs our fate. I forget somebody.
I don't know that one, but if we have decided that there's going to be another iteration of republic, we should certainly be interested, like who gets to come up with the language and narrative to frame that. Otherwise, it could go very well or go very bad.
Well, but that's
depending on who wants to.
Yeah, but
tell the
that's
story.
Churchill's great line about the Americans, right? Is they always do the right thing after they've exhausted every other possible option. I mean, we always do terrible things along the way. That's kind of the history of the American experiment, right? Is we're very bold and very creative and very innovative, and we do incredibly dumb things, and we're like, whoops, well, that didn't work. Let's try
Okay,
something
so
else.
you mean it doesn't matter what the intellectual exercise and expression is, what you're saying, reality ultimately catches up and things just corrects itself.
Right.
This nature and the universe will just catch up with you eventually. It's a nice little essay that you wrote there. It's a nice little Declaration of Independence, manifesto. That's nice. But you know what? There is a set of very complex computations that play out in reality that will catch up with you eventually.
Right. I mean, like
and you're all going to have to adjust to that reality. Your sixth republic, that's nice. This is what it's really going to look like.
Like a good example of that is all these, the trans rights movement, right? It was a very nice idea, and it was kind of this, there were these people, and they were kind of
there was an initial energy that people were just caught up in that there's an energy in that,
and then it goes wildly off the rails, and everybody now is like, oops, well, that wasn't I don't think that's really what we started out to accomplish here.
So everything could be graphed into it's always like a wave, right?
But it's going to settle into something that actually makes sense ultimately, right? I mean, there is, the laws will get adjusted. We'll stop trying to, trans the penguins, and everyone will chill out, and there's going to we'll ultimately get to something.
Yeah, I'm almost thinking that this has because I believe the cosmos doesn't reinvent itself. It's very efficient. What you described there, these cycles, these, sometimes we call it hamster wheel, has a science to it, almost like there's this moment, and then it just naturally corrects itself, and then there's another wave that comes, and just like depending on where you are in this wave. And
I think of them as kind of logos machines, right? So the Catholic Church is a logos machine, right? It's there to try to kind of generate truth through this kind of slightly this process, right? And America, and that's what makes it interesting, is also a logos machine. And it has this, but it's a much more chaotic kind of like sort of noisy one. It's a newer one too, right? The Catholic Church has the benefit of having 2,000 years of like, okay, we kind of know what we're doing because we made every mistake we could possibly make. So we're like, we're going to be a little slower and more careful now, right? Whereas America is only 250 years old. So we're still at this kind of like, let's try this. This could be cool. And, the guy that's been around for 2,000 years is like, no, don't do that. That's very bad. We tried that. It really didn't work. And we're like, the hell, let's give it a shot.
For people who may not be familiar, for the layman, can you just quickly explain logos?
So it's the idea of revealing truth through sort of facts and feelings, right? It's like you can't just prove something to be true. You have to convince somebody that it's true, and you have to make them feel it in their heart, right? So the idea of, and we use the idea of the spirit, right? It's we talk about the the spirit of the law, right? So there's the truth, there's the reality of the law, there's the actual factual law, and then there's the spirit, the intention, right, of what it meant to do and what it's trying to accomplish. And so you need both of those things working together for somebody to actually get on board with whatever it is you're trying to convince them of. And often, like we can pass a law that says you have to wait for the red light, but you're going to get half the people not waiting for the red light because they're going to be, this is stupid, there's no cars coming, I'm just going to cross, or sorry, wait for the green light. So like you have to be, when you create rules in society, you people have to believe in them, right? They can't just be on paper. And so that's what I mean by the logos is.
Oh, but I meant even something simpler. For just where does the word logos come from, and why do you and I use it so often in our exchange?
Well, it's the Greek sort of the old Greek idea of the meaning or the definition or the we get our word logo from that, right? It's the sign, the symbol, the totality of what something means, right? So,
but in our context too, it has a deeper meaning because it would refer to Christ, because he is the word.
Right. Well, that Christ becomes the symbol, the human symbol for a complicated idea, right? So that's the whole point of that, the beginning of that Gospel of John, right? And the word became flesh, right? So which in Greek is actually the logos became real, became human.
Yeah. And again, why is that important? Why is it important that the word became flesh?
Because you actually have to believe it, right? You have to interact with it. You can't just see the law written down, right? Like in the Old Testament, God gives Moses the law. He writes it on tablets. He brings the tablets down. He's like, see, everybody, we have some new rules here. Everybody's like, yeah, that's nice. We're going to go off and do our golden calf thing. And he's like, no. And then he has to go and murder a bunch of them to get them all to behave. And so it was the idea of both the law has to be felt, it has to be flesh, it has to be real,
felt and practice. And there is this
but human practice in the body, in the flesh, actually doing the motions, right? You can't just intellectualize it. You have to do it with your body.
So this is where we have a wing in NDR who are secularists and atheists. This is why I have to try to explain to them that this brand of Christianity, if you will, it's not anti-science or whatever, because it is very much connected. And I think the Catholics probably do a better job of explaining that than Protestants will, because Protestants are all about faith and miracles. But the way Catholics would explain about logos, it is the word made flesh. It's felt. It's
right. But I think the science people are. They're a little communist.
They are.
They
could be a little communist.
They want to go back to the rules, right? Because it's just easier. It's like, look, I wrote the rule down. Just follow the rule. It's up right here. Just do what it says here, right? Take the pill once a day. Just do what it says. I don't really care what you think. You don't have to feel it.
Yeah,
it's like the whole COVID shot thing, right? Again, they just did it badly, right? They sort of said, we're going to make a rule. Everybody get the COVID shot, right? And there's a lot of people who were like, I just don't feel it. I don't know. I'm not into it. I don't feel it. You haven't convinced me that I should do this. Yeah. And there was probably a better cultural way to go about that than just be kind of heavy-handed and authoritarian about it.
Yeah. I know. I could already feel a lot of people who are scratching their head just what I've said in the last paragraph. So just maybe I'll just move along, because it's like I'm either being heretical here with the people who are evangelical, or a little too woo here with people who are the science people. But one of the things that I really like about Exchange is that you and I have a very, I feel a good framework for logos that satisfy. It's very consistent with all the books going back to Genesis to the end. What logos mean, well, how logos also translate in how people interact with each other.
Yeah.
You know, like you said, people who make the rules, but it's not from logos. They're just missing that part of logos. Like you have to you really have to see and experience it. You know, what you think you made that everyone else is going to get. So
absolutely. Yep. That's I mean, you could try. It's fun to just make up rules and tell everybody what to do, but that they tend not to actually do it unless they feel it.
Yeah. So well, I said it was going to be 30 minutes. It's 36.
I think that's a good place to stop. I think
it's a good place to stop. It's enough to I guess slow drip this more. How would you describe it? Is this more academic or more
well, it's more, I mean, look, there's a great expression in Italian which you know, in English we say I'm in the mood. Like I'm not in the mood to have this conversation. In Italian it translates into it isn't in my veins to have to do this. Non è in vena. It's like it's literally, but you're literally going like for you to be like kind of engaged or doing or agreeing, it's got to be in your like in the veins. That's a good idea of like kind of expressing what logos, like you got to feel it in your you know, literally in the veins of your body in order.
So what are you trying to tell me? Are you telling me that you enjoyed the last 30 minutes, or this is what?
No, nothing to do with enjoyment or not enjoyment. I just, in terms of understanding what it means, what this idea means, right? I think sometimes, particularly in America, we have this kind of like, facts don't care about your feelings, you know, and it's like, well, actually the facts kind of do, you kind of do need the feelings part, right? You just can't be a dick about these things.
Right. So, okay. Anyway, I hope to do more of these.
All right.
Seemingly abstract conversations, but they're important because I think they help define what NDR is more. Besides what we talk about in Morning Coffee Stream, you know, I think there's a space for these seemingly abstract, but the more deeper and meaning, more insightful take on things like faith, if you will.
I think your morning coffee group is much more exciting and interesting. I think we're agreeing.
Okay, I'm going to say something here.
That's the problem. It's not interesting to watch. This is bad TV. Nobody cares because we.
No. That's not true. With due respect to my morning coffee stream, as much as I enjoy talking about the hamster wheel stuff, I think what we're talking about is, you know, stuff that I'm more Perseus.
Right. Oh yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah. So okay. Well, if you're still scratching your head, keep scratching your head. It's okay. We'll do more of these, but you know, it will all make sense eventually. So thank you, Archon of Graceland. I'll end the stream right here.
In the end, all will be revealed.
Very good. Very good. That's right. It's, if you can't make it to church, or your ex-church, whatever, come here. This is the post-church era. I don't know what you call it. Yeah.
All right.